The air inside the church was so heavy that night I could almost taste it. Sweat, candle smoke, dust from the wooden benches, all of it pressed against me as the choir sang louder, their voices shaking the rafters. I sat in the pew clutching my Bible so tightly it might have cracked in my hands. My heart would not keep still. For months I had been restless, turning from one thing to another, chasing laughter with friends, sewing until my fingers ached, lying in my room staring at the cracked ceiling. Nothing filled the emptiness. But when Pastor Marcus preached that evening, his words pierced me like a knife. He spoke about souls chained in sin, about wandering hearts that found no rest. It was as if he was speaking directly to me, stripping me bare in front of everyone. I tried to hold my ground, but my body betrayed me. My knees weakened, and before I knew it, I was on my feet, walking down the aisle. I could hear people clapping as I passed. Some were crying, others were lifting their hands and shouting. None of it mattered. My legs shook so much I thought I might collapse before I reached the altar. When I finally fell to my knees on the cold marble, it was as if the weight of all my wandering pressed me down at once. I closed my eyes. My lips barely moved, but inside I was shouting, "Lord, I cannot do this anymore. Take me. I give it all to you." A hand rested on my head, Pastor Marcus's hand, heavy and warm. His voice boomed above me, declaring that a lost soul had returned, that heaven was rejoicing. The crowd roared with him. I could feel the vibration of drums, the swell of voices, the sharp notes of the choir, but all I knew was the release that poured through me. I wept until my face was wet and my chest was sore. From that night, my life changed. I was no longer content to sit quietly in the back pew. I wanted to serve, to give everything I had. I swept the church before dawn, scrubbed the altar cloths until my knuckles cracked, polished the benches until my knees burned. When the choir sang, I stood with them, my voice trembling at first but growing stronger each week. I fasted, I prayed through the night, I whispered verses until I drifted into sleep. People noticed. The elders patted my shoulder with approving smiles. The women said I was on fire for God. And all the while, Pastor Marcus's eyes followed me. He carried himself like a man who knew the mind of heaven, and sometimes when his gaze rested on me, I felt both proud and afraid. I did not know then what his thoughts were. I did not know that the decision I made at that altar would lead me to places I never asked to go, places where faith would begin to feel less like freedom and more like a cage. It was on a Wednesday evening that Pastor Marcus called me aside. The service had ended, and the last few members were shuffling out, their footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. I was gathering hymn books when his voice stopped me. "Jennifer," he said. His tone was calm but heavy, the kind of voice you could not ignore. He was standing near the pulpit, Bible tucked beneath his arm. 2 elders stood beside him, their faces grave. I walked toward them, my hands still holding the books, my heart pounding as though I were about to be judged. "My daughter," Pastor Marcus began, looking straight at me, "you have been faithful. Your devotion has not gone unseen, and the Lord has shown me it is not good for you to remain alone. A woman of your spirit must be guided. You will be joined with one of my assistants, Pastor Donald." The words struck me like thunder. Donald? I had barely spoken to him beyond the quick greetings after service. I knew him as the tall, well-dressed man who preached with polished words, who carried himself with dignity. But as a fiancé, as a husband. I wanted to protest, to ask why him, or how do you know? But Pastor Marcus spoke with such certainty that my voice was trapped in my throat. He made it sound like prophecy, like a command from heaven itself. The elders nodded in agreement, one muttering under his breath, "God's will be done." I lowered my head and whispered, "Thank you, sir." I do not know if my lips trembled more from fear or from shock. By Sunday, the news was no longer mine to hold. It was announced openly, boldly, before the whole church. The congregation erupted with joy. The choir sang a song of celebration, women rushed to hug me, men clapped Donald on the back, children whispered and giggled. It was as if everyone had been waiting for this moment, everyone but me. Donald stood beside me at the altar as Pastor Marcus introduced us as a couple chosen for marriage. He extended his hand, and I placed mine in his. His smile was polite, his eyes unreadable. When our gazes met, I searched for warmth, but I found only a polite distance. That night, alone in my room, I sat on my bed with my scarf still on my head, staring at the wall. My Bible lay unopened beside me. I wanted to pray, but the words refused to come. My lips moved only to whisper, "Lord, is this truly your will or is it theirs?" The question hung in the silence like smoke. I did not yet know that my life was about to be tightened into rules and restrictions, watched over by Alice, the pastor's wife, who would soon step into my days as both a chaperone and a jailer. I did not have to wait long before Alice stepped into my life. It was almost as though Pastor Marcus had handed me into her keeping. From the day the announcement was made, she moved closer, her shadow falling over every step I took. Alice was a tall woman with sharp features, the sort of person who entered a room and silenced it without saying a word. Her eyes were piercing, her voice brisk, and her manner left no space for disobedience. She was the pastor's wife, and that alone gave her authority, but she carried herself as though she were also God's mouthpiece. The first thing she claimed was my clothing. She opened my small wardrobe one afternoon after choir practice, flipping through the few dresses I owned. She frowned at a gown I had sewn for myself, a bright blue fabric with neat pleats. "Too revealing," she said, though it reached well past my knees. She pulled out another, a yellow one with short sleeves. "This will not do. The congregation will see your arms." Before I could explain that I had nothing else, she pressed her lips together and announced that she would give me proper gowns. Days later, she delivered a bundle of long, heavy dresses, muted colors, stiff fabric, sleeves that reached my wrists. She also gave me scarves long enough to cover my hair and part of my face. "This," she said, placing her hand on my shoulder, "is how a woman of God must present herself. Do not be careless. Purity begins with appearance." I thanked her quietly, though inside my chest something pinched. But it was not only my clothes. She monitored my meetings with Donald. If I wanted to see him, I had to inform her first. When I did, she would accompany me, sometimes sitting silently in the same room, her eyes darting between us like a hawk. When she did not come, she would instruct me to keep the meeting short. "You are not yet his wife. Do not linger. Do not allow the devil room to tempt you." Even when I sat beside Donald, silence swallowed us. He was polite but distant, and with Alice's eyes upon us, I felt as though we were strangers acting a script. If I laughed too freely, she would clear her throat. If my hand rested on the arm of the chair too near his, she would shift in her seat. Once I asked if Donald and I could take a walk together, just to speak like ordinary people. Alice's expression hardened. "What is there to speak of that cannot wait for marriage? Do you want to give him reason to see you as loose?" Her words stung. I bowed my head and said nothing, though a storm rose in me. I had hoped engagement would bring companionship, warmth, perhaps even joy. Instead, I felt as though I had been placed in a cage, and Alice held the key. At night I would sit alone in my room, staring at the gowns she had chosen for me, gowns that seemed to strip me of color and youth. My prayers grew heavy. "Lord," I whispered, "is this submission or is it slavery? If I displease them, do I also displease you?" But the only answer was silence. I tried once to voice my concerns to Pastor Marcus. I thought perhaps if I explained gently, he would see my heart and loosen the grip Alice held on me. It was after a Sunday service. The church was emptying, and I lingered until the last of the women had gone. I walked into his office, my palms damp, my voice rehearsed in my mind. He was seated behind his desk, his Bible open though he was not reading. When I stepped in, he smiled faintly. "Yes, my daughter, what troubles you?" I swallowed hard and said, "Sir, I wish to honor the church and this engagement, but sometimes I feel restricted. I cannot speak freely with Donald. Sister Alice decides everything for me, even my clothes. I feel caged, and I fear that this is not what marriage should be." For a moment, his eyes narrowed. Then he leaned back and placed his hand firmly on the open Bible. His voice grew thunderous, though we were alone. "Jennifer, listen carefully. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Submission is the crown of a virtuous woman. Do you think God is pleased when a daughter rises against authority? Do not let rebellion take root in your heart. It is the seed of witchcraft." His words fell on me like blows. I tried to explain again, softer this time, but he cut me off. "You have been chosen for a man of God. This is not something you question. To murmur is to despise the will of the Lord. Do you want to bring shame on yourself, on this church, on me?" I lowered my eyes, heat rushing to my cheeks. I felt small, almost sinful, though all I had done was express my heart. When I left his office, tears stung my eyes. I sat in the back pew of the empty sanctuary, gripping my Bible. His words echoed in me, obedience, submission, rebellion. He had taken scripture and wrapped it around me like chains. As I sat there, I wondered if my faith had truly freed me. Was I walking in God's light, or had I stepped into a prison built with verses? I wanted to believe that my surrender at the altar was real, that God had heard me. But with every day that passed, I felt less like a child of freedom and more like a servant whose every breath had to be permitted. Still, I did not dare to voice these questions aloud again. Instead, I buried them inside me, covering them with prayers that felt thinner each night. If there was one thing that unsettled me most during those days, it was Donald's silence. I longed for warmth from him, for a hand that would steady me, or a word that would assure me I was not imagining the weight pressing on me. Yet whenever we met, he remained quiet, almost withdrawn, like a man forced into a role he had not rehearsed. I remember one afternoon at the church hall. Alice had excused herself briefly, leaving us alone. My heart leapt at the rare chance. I turned to Donald, searching his face for the tenderness of a fiancé. "Donald," I said softly, "do you truly desire this marriage? Please speak to me as one who is soon to share my life." He glanced at me, then lowered his gaze. His hands, strong and calloused from years of manual work, twisted together as though bound. For a long moment he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, almost rehearsed. "Jennifer, I respect my father's guidance. He has always known what is best for me. If he believes you are the right woman, then who am I to question him?" His tone was flat, and I felt my breath catch. I wanted him to say he loved me, that he had seen something in me worth cherishing. Instead, he spoke of duty and his father's will, as though I were a burden he had been told to carry. I tried again. "And you, what do you feel? Not Pastor Marcus, not Sister Alice, you Donald." His eyes flickered briefly toward me, then away. He rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Feelings are not everything. Marriage is obedience to God. Love will grow in time." It was not what I wanted to hear. My chest ached, but I forced a small smile, though inside my spirit groaned. When Alice returned, Donald immediately fell into silence again, his body stiff as though afraid to move wrongly before her eyes. Later that night, as I lay in bed, his words replayed in my mind. "Love will grow in time." It sounded less like a promise and more like an excuse, a way of escaping what he could not admit. I began to fear that not only was I shackled by Alice and Pastor Marcus, but Donald himself was also a prisoner of their will. And if he could not stand for his own heart, how would he ever stand for mine? The weeks that followed rushed upon me like a flood. The announcement of our wedding had already been made, and the congregation was preparing with excitement. To them, it was a holy union, a match arranged by God himself. To me, it felt like a storm I could not escape. Everywhere I turned, women approached me with smiles and blessings. They congratulated me on becoming the wife of such a God-fearing man. Some even whispered of how favored I must be to marry into the pastor's family. I nodded politely, forcing gratitude onto my lips, though inside I felt no joy. Alice took charge of every arrangement. She decided the date, the gown, the colors, even the songs that would be sung. I was consulted on nothing. When I timidly suggested a hymn I loved, she dismissed it. That will not fit the dignity of the occasion. I wanted to object, to claim at least one choice for myself, but the words froze in my throat. By now, I knew resistance was useless. Donald remained as distant as ever. During church meetings, he kept his head bowed, his words few. Once I caught him staring at the floor, his face heavy with thought. But when I tried to speak with him later, he brushed me off with a weary smile. At night, I prayed harder than ever. Lord, if this is truly your will, give me peace. But if it is not, make a way of escape for me. Show me a sign, for my heart is troubled. Yet no sign came, only the steady march of days drawing me closer to the altar. One evening, I sat by my window, the moon casting pale light on my hands. I whispered to myself, this is not how a bride should feel. A bride should be joyous, not fearful. But even as I said it, I knew my voice trembled with helplessness. The wedding loomed before me like a sentence already written. And though I longed to run, my feet felt bound, and my silence became the heaviest chain of all. It was Mabel who finally gave voice to the questions I had buried deep within me. She was the kind of friend who carried laughter in her eyes but wisdom in her heart, and I clung to her company as though it were a lifeline. We sat in a small restaurant not far from the church one warm afternoon. The place smelled faintly of fried plantain and stew, and the hum of voices blended with the clatter of spoons. For once, I felt free away from Alice's watchful eyes. Mabel leaned forward across the table, her chin resting on her hand. Jennifer, you do not look like a woman preparing for marriage. You look like someone walking to her own funeral. Her words struck me, and I lowered my gaze to the steaming plate before me. I tried to smile, but the corners of my lips refused to rise. It's not that bad, I whispered, though the weakness in my tone betrayed me. She frowned. Don't lie to me. I know you, Jennifer. You've always dreamed of love, of a man who would cherish you. But tell me the truth, has Donald shown you any sign of that? I sighed, the weight of weeks pressing on my shoulders. He is dutiful, obedient to his father, respectful, yes, but he is distant, Mabel. It feels as if he is marrying me out of obligation, not choice. And Alice, she controls everything. What I wear when I see him, even how I sit when we're together. I can barely breathe. Mabel shook her head slowly. That is not marriage, Jennifer. That is bondage. Her bluntness startled me, but it was a truth I could not deny. Listen to me, she continued, her voice firm yet tender. Happiness is not a sin. If a union steals your joy, it cannot be of God. You must ask yourself, are you marrying because you truly love him, or because you are afraid of disappointing people? Her question pierced me. I stared at her, my throat dry, unable to answer. Deep inside, I knew what she was saying was right, but fear kept my lips sealed. Before I could reply, my eyes drifted across the room. That was when I noticed him, a man seated alone by the window, watching me with quiet intensity. His features were strong, his eyes steady and kind. When our gazes met, I felt a strange warmth, like the first touch of sunlight after rain. I looked away quickly, but something inside me stirred. Mabel, noticing, followed my gaze and raised her brows. She said nothing, but her knowing smile lingered, as though she had glimpsed the shadow of a story yet to unfold. The man from the restaurant did not remain a stranger for long. His name was Ferdinand, and his presence began to cross paths with mine in ways that felt both natural and unexpected. He approached our table that very afternoon, his voice calm and confident. "Pardon me," he said, directing his words to me, "but I could not help noticing how troubled you seemed. I hope I am not intruding, but I wanted to offer a word of encouragement. Whatever it is you are going through, you have more strength than you know." His kindness disarmed me. I murmured a polite thank you, unsure how to respond, but his sincerity lingered long after he left the restaurant. In the days that followed, I encountered him again, once outside the church compound, another time at the marketplace. Each time he greeted me warmly, never overstepping, yet always leaving me with the sense that he cared. It was strange. With Donald, I felt invisible, as though my thoughts did not matter. With Ferdinand, even the smallest exchange of words made me feel seen. One evening, he found me by the roadside after choir practice. The sky was tinted with the fading glow of sunset, and the air smelled of dust and roasted corn. "You seem weary," he said gently. "Is it the wedding preparations?" I hesitated. To confide in him felt dangerous, yet the temptation to unburden myself was strong. "It is everything," I whispered. "Sometimes I wonder if I am losing myself in all this." He looked at me then, his gaze unwavering. "Do not lose yourself, Jennifer. Love is not meant to erase who you are. It is meant to strengthen you, to give you freedom." His words struck me with the force of truth. Tears stung my eyes, and I quickly turned away, afraid to reveal too much. Yet in that moment, something shifted in me. For the first time in months, I felt the stirring of hope, not in Donald, not in Alice or Pastor Marcus, but in the possibility that life could be different. As Ferdinand walked away, his figure fading into the evening light, my heart pounded with confusion. I told myself he was only a friend, that nothing more could ever happen. Still, deep within, I knew the walls I had built were beginning to crack. The closer the wedding drew, the heavier my spirit became. Each day felt like walking deeper into a tunnel with no light at the end. Ferdinand's words lingered in my mind, echoing in the silence of my nights. "Love is not meant to erase who you are." Donald remained withdrawn, lost in his own silence. His visits were brief, his conversations shorter still. He never reached for my hand, never spoke with the tenderness of a man awaiting his bride. I began to dread our moments together, for they only reminded me of how empty this union felt. Alice tightened her hold on me as the weeks dwindled. She inspected my clothes, dictated my schedule, and criticized the smallest detail. "Jennifer, you must learn to be meek," she would say, her tone sharp. "A wife must not be too forward. Do not expect affection before marriage, it is sinful. Keep your distance from Donald and do not complain. Obedience is your beauty." I nodded, as always, though inwardly I recoiled. Her words pressed against my heart like iron chains. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating air of my room, I slipped out for a walk. The streets were quiet, the lamps flickering dimly in the dusk. I found myself near Ferdinand's home, though I had not planned it. By some providence, or perhaps chance, he stepped out just as I passed. "Jennifer," he said, surprise and warmth in his voice. "Are you all right?" I should have walked away, but the question broke through my defenses. The tears I had fought so long finally spilled. I confessed in a trembling voice, "I feel trapped, Ferdinand. Everyone tells me what to do, how to be. Even my fiancé does not see me. I am disappearing piece by piece. He looked at me with a gentleness that both comforted and frightened me. Then you must not let them erase you. You have a soul worth cherishing, a heart worth loving. Do not settle for chains and call it God's will. His words were dangerous, yet liberating. For the first time, I dared to imagine a different life, a life where I was loved freely. I knew he wanted more than friendship, but he never pressed me. His patience spoke louder than any confession of love. That night, lying awake, my thoughts churned. I prayed, I questioned, I doubted. Was I sinning by even listening to him? Or was God using his voice to open my eyes? My heart grew restless. Haunted by shadows I could not yet name. The truth came to me not in whispers, but in a cruel unveiling. It was a late afternoon when I decided, against Alice's orders, to visit Donald unannounced. Something within me had urged me, perhaps suspicion, perhaps desperation. His home was quiet when I arrived. I knocked lightly, but no one answered. The door, strangely, was not locked. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The air was heavy, carrying a scent that made my skin prickle. I walked down the corridor, each step hesitant. From the half-open door of his bedroom, I heard faint sounds, breathing, movement. My hands shook as I pushed it wider. What I saw froze me in place. There upon Donald's bed lay two bodies entangled, naked, shameless. Alice's hair fell loose around her shoulders as she turned in surprise, her eyes widening when she saw me. Donald's face drained of color, his lips parted in horror. The room was filled with the undeniable stench of betrayal. My knees weakened, but I did not fall. I stood rooted, staring at the two people who had dictated my life, who had bound me in chains of obedience, who had preached purity and righteousness, now exposed in filth. Donald stammered, "Jennifer, it's not what you think." But his words collapsed under the weight of the truth before me. Alice, bold even in disgrace, pulled the sheet around her body. Her eyes held no shame, only irritation at being discovered. "You should not have come here without notice," she said coldly. Her arrogance struck me harder than the betrayal itself. In that moment, a clarity washed over me. All the months of control, the manipulation, the silencing of my voice, it was never about holiness. It was about power, hypocrisy, and selfish desire. I turned without a word, my tears blinding me, and fled the house. The streets blurred around me as I ran, my heart breaking yet strangely lighter, for the veil had been torn away. I could no longer deny the truth. I had been a pawn in their game, nothing more. When I finally reached my room, I collapsed to the floor, trembling. Between sobs, I whispered a prayer. "God, save me from their lies. Show me the path of freedom. I will not return to chains." The wedding that once loomed over me now lay shattered. In its ruins, a new choice waited, though I did not yet know where it would lead. But one thing was certain. Jennifer, the silent and obedient bride, was gone.